Guild Wars 3 was officially announced last month during the Summer Games Fest, and my initial reaction was, okay, that's interesting, but, why? Slightly clickbaity title aside, I don't mean that in a dismissive or arsholish type way. I mean it from the perspective of someone who's not already a lifelong Guild Wars fan. If you're a new player looking in from the outside, why does Guild Wars 3 have to exist? Okay, let me explain. My own history with the series goes all the way back to Guild Wars 1. I've said on stream many times that it was the first online social RPG, not MMO, I ever played as a teenager. The biggest reason was its buy once play forever payment model, which really set it apart from the other online giant at the time, World of Warcraft. Eventually, I migrated over to Warcraft in my late teens and early 20s, once I had, disposable income. But I can't deny the influence Guild Wars had. It was my introduction to online gaming, and it had a huge impact on me. Guild Wars 2, on the other hand, is a really good but very different game. I've only properly played it once before, and I got one character to level 80, finished my personal story, and then got distracted by some other games. Recently though, I've started streaming Guild Wars 2 as a returning almost new player. My plan is to play through all the story and expansion content, and so far I've found the Guild Wars community genuinely friendly and welcoming, unlike you smelly Warcraft bunch. So, with Guild Wars 3 provocatively slapping its bum on the horizon, I've put together a list of questions that immediately came to mind. Some have already been answered by ArenaNet, while others, well, we'll just have to wait and see. But the biggest question is simply, but why Guild Wars 3? Or maybe a better way of putting it is, what is ArenaNet hoping to accomplish with Guild Wars 3 that they can't already do with Guild Wars 2? Because, as history has shown us, one of the worst things you can do with an online game is split your player base. Is Guild Wars 3 supposed to outright replace Guild Wars 2? The way that Destiny 2 replaced Destiny, or the way that Final Fantasy XIV ultimately replaced Final Fantasy XI. And yes, I know that 11 and 14 are technically different universes, but let's be honest, if you're a brand new MMO player today, you're picking 14 over 11, unless you're an MMO archaeologist documenting the abandoned ruins of gaming history. It doesn't matter what you renamed your Lalafels to. Thankfully, this is where ArenaNet has a genuine advantage and a pretty solid track record. Guild Wars 2 didn't replace or invalidate Guild Wars 1. Even though active development on Guild Wars stopped over a decade ago, so that the studio could focus on Guild Wars 2, the original game has remained alive with a dedicated community. And now, with Guild Wars Reforged, it's even been remastered with quality of life improvements that makes it just as playable and, more importantly, still relevant today. ArenaNet has also said they'll continue support for Guild Wars 2 and Guild Wars Reforged alongside Guild Wars 3, giving players 3 very different experiences. But what exactly does that mean? I think we can split it into 2 categories: narrative and mechanics. Narratively, ArenaNet has said that they're taking something of an Elder Scrolls Online approach. Rather than continuing the Guild Wars 2 story, Guild Wars 3 is set thousands of years before Guild Wars 1, even before the first canonical Guild War, which, admittedly, makes the naming slightly confusing. Honestly though, it makes sense. It gives Guild Wars 2 room to continue telling its own story without Guild Wars 3 stepping on its toes. At the same time, Guild Wars 3 gets an almost completely unexplored period of the history where the writers can basically do whatever the hell they want, provided they don't accidentally blow up the planet. So, narratively, everybody wins. If you're invested in Guild Wars 2 ongoing story, there's no reason to jump ship. But, if you're completely new and want to experience a fresh story from day one, instead of working through the base game and 6 expansions, Guild Wars 3 becomes a very attractive entry point. You hear that, Final Fantasy XIV? Take notes. Mechanically, I think the announcement says just as much. Guild Wars 3 is launching on PC through both the ArenaNet launcher and Steam. So hopefully that means Steam Deck verified too. But also PlayStation 5. That's a huge clue. Guild Wars 2 has always felt like a game that desperately needed proper native controller support, and if ArenaNet are really targeting consoles while describing Guild Wars 3 as a more action RPG experience, focused on movement and momentum, that immediately makes me think of games like Terra or Warframe. Both had fantastic movement-focused combat, but only one had questionable jiggle physics. RIP Terra. That would be a significant departure from Guild Wars 2's still largely tab target based combat, which itself was already a huge departure from Guild Wars 1. Guild Wars 1 famously didn't have a Z-axis, so no jumping or vertical gameplay. Guild Wars 2, however, introduced jumping puzzles, vistas, layered maps, and eventually mounts, each with their own unique traversal mechanics. The catch is that the mount system was added later through expansions. Guild Wars 3, by comparison, sounds like it's being built around movement from the ground up, rather than being bolted on years later. It's also reportedly being built in Unreal Engine 5, instead of ArenaNet's in-house engine, which, again, just makes business sense. Most modern developers are already trained in Unreal, and the days of spending months teaching every new hire how to use a bespoke engine are slowly disappearing. We've already seen similar moves from the likes of Halo Studios and CD Projekt Red. Okay, so a lot of my initial questions have already been answered. Guild Wars 3 isn't replacing Guild Wars 1 or 2. Narratively, it stands apart. Mechanically, it's aiming at a very different audience with a significantly different gameplay style, rather than cannibalizing its existing player base. This is all good news, but I still have a few more questions. So let's start with a very easy one. Will Guild Wars 3 use vertical or horizontal progression? Vertical progression is your typical World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy XIV system, where every expansion raises the level cap and gear ceiling, making most previous content obsolete. If you want to play the latest expansion, you're expected to work your way through everything that came before, or just buy a level boost. Horizontal progression, on the other hand, is a concept largely popularised by, well, Guild Wars, and later adopted by ESO. Instead of endlessly increasing player power, new content sits alongside existing content, making older areas and activities still relevant for years to come. Thankfully, ArenaNet has already confirmed that Guild Wars 3 will be sticking with horizontal progression, so we can all breathe a collective sigh of relief. They've even said that they want to bring back Guild Wars 1's skill collection system, meaning that progression isn't about chasing the highest item level or gear score. It's about unlocking new skills, experimenting with builds, and finding interesting synergies, which was one of the most beloved aspects of the original game. So far, so good. Now, what about monetization? One of Guild Wars' defining features has always been its business model. Back in the early 2000s, it was a pretty ballsy move to launch an online RPG with no monthly subscription. For broke teenagers such as myself, that's what made it so much more appealing than Warcraft. Guild Wars 2 continued that philosophy. It launched as a buy-to-play model before eventually making the base game and a huge chunk of the early content free to play. By the time you've exhausted everything available for free, spending 20 or 30 quid on an expansion, probably less during a Steam sale, actually kind of feels like pretty good value. But Guild Wars 3 raises an interesting question. ArenaNet has already confirmed it'll also be buy-to-play. Does that still make sense in 2026? Especially now that it's launching on both PC and PS5. So if I want to play on PC or Steam Deck and on my PS5 for that comfy sofa experience, do I have to buy the game twice? Will I have to buy every expansion twice? Because I've already lived through this with Diablo 4, Destiny 2, Cyberpunk 77 and Final Fantasy 14. Wow, Final Fantasy 14 is getting an absolute kicking in this video. That wasn't intended. As a consumer, I buy games on consoles because it makes for a nicer living room experience. And I'll often pick up the same game again during a Steam sale, so I can play it portably on the Steam Deck. Unfortunately, this means that when paid content drops, it often makes the console version obsolete, because I don't want to buy every expansion a second time. Personally, I'd love to see Guild Wars 3 offer a generous free trial, with every expansion or paid content unlocking account-wide across every platform you own. Though, realistically, I ain't holding my breath. Now on to a slightly existential question. Will it even be an MMO? Yindy, what the hell are you on about? It says MMO right there on the Steam tags. Yes, okay, Captain Obvious. But seriously, what even is an MMO anymore? The genre has evolved massively over the last 25 years or so. We've went from Ultima Online and EverQuest, basically glorified chat rooms with RPGs attached, to the MMO gold rush of the 2010s, where everyone and their dog tried and failed to be the next ever-elusive WoW killer, my beloved Warhammer Online included. Fast forward to today, and we've got live service games, seasonal content, battle passes, extraction games, survival games, shared or persistent world RPGs. Even Minecraft and Roadblocks arguably function more like gaming platforms than traditional games. So what exactly counts as a next generation MMO? Look at Dune Awakening. It can't decide if it's an MMO or a sandbox survival game. Well, to be fair, at least they committed to the sandbox part, literally. Is Diablo 4 an MMO? It's always online. You share a persistent world with other players. RuneScape even released a survival game that they deliberately went out of their way to refute that it's an MMO. Hell, even Guild Wars 1 famously doesn't even hold the title of MMO and is often referred to as an online hub-based multiplayer RPG, which honestly is a bit of a mouthful. So maybe the label itself is a bit redundant by this point. So instead, I think the more interesting question is, what should a modern online multiplayer RPG actually look like? Personally, I think there's a lot we can learn from the recent explosion of friend swap games, and I don't mean that as an insult. I mean games that are easy to jump into, quick to understand, and quick to get to a point where you can enjoy them with your mates. Or pick up again without needing a university degree to remember how they work after 6 months away. I see you shuffling in the back, Final Fantasy XIV. I shouldn't need to spend 60 hours unlocking things before I can enjoy meaningful content with my friends. Helldivers 2 absolutely nails this. And although Guild Wars 2 absolutely nails the jump in with your friends or random people from the start aspect, it does suffer from the returning player problem. It was probably one of my biggest barriers as a returning player. I logged in and immediately asked myself, wait, who am I? Why am I here? What's this pop-up? Oh god, why is my inventory full of crap? Oh god, somebody help me! Now, I'm sure there's plenty of Guild Wars veterans that would argue that that's part of the game's charm. And honestly, that's fair. Guild Wars 1 represented a classic online RPG of the early 2000s. Guild Wars 2 became one of the defining MMOs of the 2010s. So, Guild Wars 3 now has an opportunity to throw all that accumulated baggage out the way and build something faster, cleaner, and more approachable from day one, especially if they're trying to appeal to the filthy, mouth-breathing console peasants, of which I am proudly one. Although given the price of graphics cards these days, I'm not entirely convinced that PC players are going to get away with that insult for much longer. So, in conclusion, I genuinely think there's room in the market for whatever a next-generation MMO could end up looking like. And if any studio has earned the benefit of the doubt, it's ArenaNet. They've built an entire franchise around ignoring industry trends and doing their own thing, and somehow making it work. That doesn't mean Guild Wars 3 is guaranteed to succeed. It'll have plenty of challenges of its own, but the most reassuring thing ArenaNet has committed to is continuing to support both Guild Wars 1 and 2 while building Guild Wars 3. That means that if Guild Wars 3 stumbles out the gate, the previous games aren't suddenly obsolete. Nobody needs to blow up their entire world and perform corporate seppuku in front of the shareholders. Sorry, couldn't resist getting one final dig in. I love you really, weird goth cat girls and all. It'll be fascinating to see where the Guild Wars franchise goes next. But until the open beta arrives next year, come hang out on Twitch as I work through the Guild Wars 2 expansions and relive my Guild Wars 1 glory days. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like, subscribe, and while you're here, remember to go check out the next episode of Halfwits. Hope you have a fabulous day, and I'll see you all next time. Yindy, out.